Hello everyone, my name is Tilmoen Zercht and my partner and co-author is Ayurdan Tumurbat. We are from Mandakh University, Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. We have studied the differences between using paper dictionary and e-dictionary effects in memorizing new words. And our presentation will be in the following contents. First, we will introduce about our topic. Second, we will tell you more about dictionaries. And third, we will discuss about theories regarding human memory and memorization. And after that, we will present our research results. And then we will end our presentation with our conclusion and references. Now let's move on to the introduction. In terms of learning a language, students, us, only had paper dictionaries, and dictionaries are the most important lexical resource for learning a language. And the conventional or the traditional method was the paper dictionary. But nowadays, in 21st century, as technology emerges, we have a new competitor called e-dictionary. And now more and more students are using e-dictionary on their smartphones or Google Translate services rather than using paper dictionaries. This action does truly have several benefits, such as saving time and being easier to access and so on. But these benefits, are they actually worth for the students to be using the e-dictionary instead of paper dictionary? And we aim that using paper dictionary has more beneficial and long-lasting information when studying a second language. We aim to prove this theory. And in terms of dictionaries, today, English is the main means of communication between nations, and every learner has a vocabulary problem when learning a foreign language. And in this sense, a dictionary can be very helpful to solve this problem. With the help of dictionaries, students learn the meaning of unfamiliar words and their pronunciation. Now, researcher rightly said that being able to use a dictionary in the right way enables students to enhance communication and upgrade their academic achievements at school. And in 2016, Devadil also mentioned that using dictionaries is a vital assistance in lexical learning. And nowadays, orientation of e-dictionaries has emerged, a new valuable resource for memorizing vocabulary. And in 2008, Nissi also mentioned that the main difference between e-dictionaries and paper dictionaries is in their manner of access to vocabulary information. And here I will present some information about e-dictionaries, advantages and disadvantages. E-dictionaries provide learners access easily and quickly, Laufer mentioned in 2000. And in 2005, Sterling did some survey, and this illustrated that the study showed that several teachers complained about electronic dictionaries as it was inaccurate, noisy, and also distracting students. Although the development of e-dictionaries in the past decade made them easily accessible to many more students all over the world, many students in Asian countries are still using printed dictionaries as the reference tool in language learning. And here, the advantages and disadvantages of paper-based dictionaries are mentioned. Paper-based dictionaries was huge, fragile, and limited in the amount of vocabulary. Compared to e-dictionary, it is very easy to carry around. You can almost find it everywhere: smartphones, laptops, or personal computers as well. And the only advantage of paper-based dictionary is that it effectively improves memorizing new words when learning a foreign language. Now let's talk about memorization. Most scholars, memory. Now first let's talk about memory. Memory makes the bridge to connect the past to our future. We learn from the past. We keep our experience in our mind as a memory, and we use this information to improve ourselves in the future. This is a process where people feel their surroundings, and when we meet others, and the impressions and reminiscences are stored in our brain, and this is called memory. In other words, this is a neurological process involving people storing their past experiences, feelings, and recalling them. And most scholars define memory as a step process, and the steps are distinguished according to how long the information is stored in each one of the steps. The first step is the direct memorizing effect. In this step, every single information coming through our senses will be directly received in about 0.1 to 0.5 seconds. Our sensor memory is not difficult to understand. You can close your eyes and open it, and then close again, and the image you see in your brain lasts for a short while. And when storing information in this method, our upper brain had more, if we used more attention, paid more attention, the image can be seen approximately for about 20 seconds. This is called short-term memory, and this is the second step. Now let's talk about the main processes. The first process is encoding. Before we store information, encoding takes place. Using our senses, such as emotion and feelings, we encode the information into our brain. The essence of encoding lies in the integrity and cohesion of the information. We encode the information into our brain through our consciousness. The first step to encoding takes place unintentionally, without setting a goal or using any devices. This occurs naturally. And after we encoded the message, we can store the information into our brain. This is where the encoded information is actively processed, systemized, and this is when we set a goal to memorize a new word or memorize a poem or even a song. And this information will be enriched and eventually stored in our brain. Storing information relies heavily on how the person understood the information deeply. The more attention you paid to the information, the longer the memory stays. The storing process is also dependent on the person's habit or his or her characteristics. An individual person usually never forgets a crucial information. And after that, the third process is recalling. This is a process where a person remembers the previously stored information. In other words, despite the fact that a certain event has already happened, a person can reimagine the whole scenario. This process can either be voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary recall occurs unintentionally, but the involuntary recall occurs after we set aims or when we actually try to remember what happened in the past. And after that, the fourth step will be decoding. This happens when an object related to a certain memory is seen or felt again. And after that, the most important step will be forgetting, a process where information in the memory is fully and completely unrecoverable. Encoded and stored information continuously becomes difficult to recall and decode. Forgetting stored information happens when there is a temporary nerve cell failure, and mostly unimportant, uninteresting, and unrelated information gets lost easily. Forgetting can be partial, full, and temporary. When an information is fully forgotten, it can't be remembered or even recognized at all. When it's partially forgotten, some parts of the information will be or can be recalled or recalled with flaws. Sometimes we can recognize the information but not recall it truly. And temporary forgetting happens from disturbance in our nerve cells outside the brain. Aside from the above mentioned reasons, some certain diseases, drugs, amnesia, and alcohol can cause certain temporary forgetting. Now, in the second slide, we will talk about the types of memory. There are two main types of memory. The first is the voluntary memory. Voluntary memorization is when we are using a special method to memorize information with a certain aim. Usually it consumes so much energy. This memorization can be reliant on many factors, including the purpose of the memorization. For example, to learn a new language. And the second type is the involuntary memory or spontaneous memory. This memorization doesn't require energy, but it is stored when we are working with information or doing any action. It happens commonly in young age, but is weak in adults. These are the main types of memory. And let's move on to this information classifications. There are several memory types in terms of stored information. The first will be the inherited memory. This is called the primary memory. When we drive a car, when we tie a tie, or when we use a tool such as drill or screwdriver, and many other everyday actions require many different movement memories from our brain. This is the inherited memory. Second will be image memory. The images stored in our senses are later required to be used, thus it gets recalled. When we are talking about image memory, this does not only mean photographic memory. The image memory can be classified as depending on which sense we are using, such as visual, hearing, feeling, smelling, and even tasting. And the third type of memory is the emotional memory. It's created almost at the same time as primary memory and is usually stored from our emotions and characteristics in certain times and situations. And the fourth type is the oral long-term memory. It stores information over a long period of time. This type of memory includes long-term voluntary storing and long-term closed storing. The next is the short-term memory. When doing certain actions, accessing long-term and short-term memory to store and use information at a quick pace. Next is the oral memory. This type of memory is only used by humans and is also known as the word logic or semantic memory. And the last classification is the intermediate term memory. This allows us to store and access information for a few hours to several seconds, several weeks. Most of the time, our brain stores information during the night time, and after a short while, this information is transferred to long-term memory, thus giving up some space for the next intermediate memory. And in terms of memorization, we also have to talk about preventing or reducing forgetfulness. First, we must understand the context of the information. Some information that are not well understood or mechanically stored information is lost faster than the others. And the second most important thing about not forgetting is repeating the information. The more repetition we make, the more the information stays longer in our memory. And the last factor is the action itself. For what purpose and why we are doing the task plays an important role in storing an information. The more attention you pay, the longer the information will stay in our brain. Now let's talk about our research. The previously mentioned studies about memory mostly implied that our brain effectively memorizes and recalls an information that are repeated multiple times or those that made deep impression to us. For foreign language learners, memorizing new words can be a difficult process, and it plays an important role in their study. Thus, the method they use to look up a new word can be very much relevant to how they memorize the new word. We have taken a survey from 105 sophomore students of our Mandakh University, and the reason why we chose sophomore students is because they have something in common. All the students are studying the same course, taking the same course, Professional English 1. The questions were aimed to define which type of dictionaries the students are using and how it's affecting their vocabulary building. We have used Google Forms to conduct the survey, and there was also a memory test with the new words learned from Professional English 1 course, which all the students had already studied, and we have taken this test to see if they actually could recall the information they have studied in the past. Now let's present our research results. In the first figure, you can see how much students actually use paper dictionary and e-dictionary. Most students use e-dictionary due to the fact Mostly, we assume it was due to the fact that e-dictionaries are easy to access and much faster than paper dictionaries. And second figure, you can see that reasons for not using paper dictionary was mostly because the students say that e-dictionary is much faster than paper dictionaries, and also paper dictionaries are heavy to carry around. With this figure clearly indicates that the two main causes for not using paper dictionary. Moving on to the second slide, we can see what methods does the students use to study the vocabulary outside the class. We have asked this question in order to check the quality of the answers they take when they do the memory test from the new words. And 63% of our respondents answered that they do actually study their vocabulary outside the class during their free time. And the highest column represents that 60 of the students use mechanical storing method, or repeating the translation, and 26 students use flashcard, and 25 students use the understanding the logical meaning method. So these methods are all in the part of mentioned in the memory theory, which classifies into the mechanically storing information section. And the next graph, figure 4, shows the question number 6 of our survey. What are the reasons not to study the class vocabulary outside the class? So 37% of the students answered that they do not actually study their new words or vocabulary outside the class, and the main cause being the students forgetting about studying, and they don't actually have time to memorize the words and study their lessons. And the third main reason is that they have too many chores at home and they could not make the time to study the new words. And with above questions, we have classified the respondents into 4 categories. The first is the paper dictionary users, who do not revise their lessons outside the class. The second group is e-dictionary users, who also do not revise their vocabulary outside the class. Third group is the paper dictionary users, who revise their lesson outside the class. And the last group is e-dictionary users, who also revise their vocabulary outside the class. And here we will present the test scores which we have taken through our survey from Professional English 1 course. From the graph, you can clearly see that the green line represents the paper dictionary users who actually revise their lessons. Totally 4.75. The maximum score was 5, and the highest amount was the paper dictionary users had the highest score. And second, e-dictionary users who revised their lesson outside the class or during their free time had the best score. So from here, the students who revised their lesson definitely has the highest score, but the paper dictionary users had better score than the e-dictionary users. And here our conclusion states that, as mentioned by the scholars in our first chapter, using paper dictionary makes learners repeat the word multiple times, and in this sense, the new words are stored in long-term memory. From the study, we can conclude that students who mechanically memorized the new words using paper dictionary did have better score than the students who use e-dictionary. On the other hand, students who mechanically memorize new words know the translation of the words, but made some mistakes in matching the meaning exercises. And if we compare the results of paper dictionary users who don't revise the new words, had much better scores than e-dictionary users who also didn't revise the lesson. To summarize that, using a paper dictionary has better impression in our consciousness. It is also worth mentioning that e-dictionary or smartphone dictionaries mostly show the translation of the words only. This lacks the context to provide full information about the word. Looking up a word in an e-dictionary only takes a matter of seconds, so the information is encoded and stored in our short-term memory, which usually fades away easily unless we make repetition. Using paper dictionary has many benefits for language learners. In terms of everyday usage, e-dictionary definitely beats paper dictionary, but for language learners, paper dictionary is the best. As foreign language educators, we must encourage our students to use paper dictionary in their study period. Thank you for listening.